Or they never taught us. From 1492 to 1775, America wasn't discovered, it was invaded. Not by one country, by 7. Russia came through Alaska. The Netherlands took parts of Canada. Britain and England worked both east and west coasts. France came up through New Orleans and the Gulf. Italy moved through Texas and Gulf territories. Spain invaded from the west coast down through Argentina and Chile and back up the spine of America. This wasn't exploration. This was a 283-year war, and the target indigenous Black Americans, the copper-colored, wool-haired people already here. They didn't come here to enslave Africans. They came to steal land from the indigenous. They just called us Negro to erase who we were. By 1775, we surrendered. We lost our right to vote, lost our land, and got renamed. They threw us on reservations if we submitted, and labeled us Negro if we refused. And now they act like we don't belong, like our story started on a slave ship. But the truth, the ships never brought us here. They were used to ship us out, erase us from this land. This war wasn't just physical, it was legal, paper genocide, land grabs, reclassification. The original Americans are now called everything but what we are. You want to know why we're struggling? Because we're fighting under false names, false history, and stolen status. It's time to correct it. Learn the truth. Reclaim your status. You're not lost. You were renamed. And now it's time to return. Please like, share, and subscribe. Give your honest opinion.
A black man's DNA, discovered by accident, completely shattered that narrative. His name was Albert Perry, and when scientists tested his Y chromosome, they found something so ancient, so impossible, it sent shockwaves through the genetic community. His DNA didn't match any other group on Earth, not Native American, not European, not even other African lineages. It was older, hundreds of thousands of years older. Older than the pyramids, older than written language, older than modern humans themselves. And the most shocking part? It was discovered in a black man living in America. Knew that a black man's DNA, discovered by accident.
The idea that black Africans had mastered the Atlantic Ocean centuries before Columbus threatened the very foundation of European colonial legitimacy. The notion that Africans reached America first, established trade routes, influenced civilizations, and left monumental evidence of their presence, that would require rewriting every history book on the shelf. Even when the Olmec head stared back with undeniably African features, when carbon dating proved African presence centuries before Columbus, when metallurgical evidence showed precise African techniques in pre-Columbian weapons, the academic establishment chose silence. In 4 centuries of American historical scholarship, no one bothered to ask why ancient Mexican monuments bore African faces. No one questioned why Columbus found spearheads made with precise African metallurgical techniques. No one wondered why Balboa encountered entire villages of black inhabitants in Panama. The truth remained buried, not because it was hidden, but because, as Marvel explained, we willingly chose a different history, one that satisfied our cultural narrative, one that kept Europe at the center of human achievement, and one that relegated Africa to the margins of world history. In 1492, Christopher Columbus stood on those shores, holding evidence of an inconvenient truth. Spearheads that proved Africans had mastered the Atlantic centuries before him. That evidence disappeared into the depths of history, just as he intended. But truth has a way of resurfacing. The colossal heads still stand, facing east across the Atlantic. The ancient African skeletons still rest in American soil. The temple murals still show their alliances, and the maritime records still tell their stories of African ships crossing the ocean centuries before Columbus set sail. We begin
way of water. They went in 2 directions. They went out to what is now known as Oceania and became a people known as the Negritos, and they also went towards Mexico and impacted this Olmec civilization. The reason why we now know that is because there was a genetic trace done. You know about DNA now. That's getting a lot of play in the paper. DNA means you can trace the genetic code of a people. The genetic code of the, and there are still native blacks in Mexico. That's never been explained by archaeologists before Columbus arrived. DNA tests done on them. DNA tests done on the bones of some of the Olmec people, not all of them, the ancient remains, show a definite genetic trace, not to Africa only, but across the Pacific. When they found that out, they said that's got to be wrong. It just doesn't. There are no black people out in the Pacific, but there's this definite trace, lineage they could trace out towards Hawaii and beyond Hawaii. Then they began a worldwide match of DNA. Well, who does these strange black people, who do they match up with? They don't match up with Africans. They matched up with the Negritos in Oceania. It looks now, scientists believe, there was a central point from which they went in both directions. So this is a marvelous heritage. And, you know, some people say, well, you're a white guy, how can you talk about stuff like this? I get flack from this on both sides. The purpose of our magazine is to tell the truth about what happened to our country and our continents before Columbus. And if it shows that there were white Vikings here, and there were, we tell that. And if it shows that there were Asians here visiting, Chinese here visiting Mexico, we'll tell about that. And if there were blacks here, we have to tell that too. That's all part of our heritage. And I think it's thrilling and exciting for all of us. It's remarkable. So what we're telling you, I mean, this is just in a nutshell, and you're going to be seeing a lot more of this, not just in our magazine. Believe me, you're going to be seeing this on TV. It's bound to burst out because it's really known in the archaeological community. You've had 4 of these major impacts that the black people have made to the Americas, not only before Columbus was born, but before even Spain or Italy existed. That's the kind of roots that are in this country. And by knowing that, and the more you know about it, it's an empowerment. You're really rooted. You have got a heritage which is more than slavery. Sure, there was slavery, but that's not all. That's a small part of it. Long before that, there's a heritage of kings, seafarers, religious missionaries, and they were all here. But it happened so long ago, there's just so little of it left. And that's basically my story. What connects it up is even the word Moor, because it's pronounced differently in different parts of Africa. And they call them...
set out deliberately to come to America. We know of 2 such voyages. We know, for example, in the case of the Mandingo in 1310 and 1311, where the Africans were convinced there was a landmass in the south and set out deliberately. A whole fleet was fitted out for that. And when that fleet did not return, one of their kings, Abubakar II, actually set out as a commander of the fleet and moved into this area. We also have evidence in the late pre-Columbian, that is around 1450 AD, we have evidence where Africans not only deliberately came, but came back. And we have African things found in America as well as American things found in Africa as evidence of a trading going on in that time.
What was the nature of the African who were indigenous to the land here?
Well, it depends on the period. In the case of the Olmec period, which is the pre-Christian period, which is the 948 to 680 BC, we have evidence that some very extraordinary things begin to happen that coincide with the stone heads with African features, which are found in the Gulf of Mexico at the terminus of currents coming from Africa. Now, one very important thing to understand is that there are 3 major currents that take things from Africa. They are so powerful, these currents, that it's like a gravitational field.
The oceanic current.
You cannot escape coming to America once you are caught 100 miles off the African coast and enter either the current off the Cape Verde, off the Senegambia coast, or off the southern coast of Africa. You have to come here, unless you're caught by the fish. It's an episode in which the Africans set out.
Virginia and sold of Africans were subsequently brought to Virginia and sold over the next decades. Only very few, only 300. Only very few, only 350 years later. Oh, sorry, 20 years later. But meantime, hundreds, thousands of poor whites were being brought in, and on various convicts and children, etc. And they were being enslaved. And they were being enslaved.
Striking demographic fact about the Americas is that the black population of the U.S., which of course amounted at the time of the Civil War to something like 4 million people. Those people did not come from Africa. They came as a result of natural population growth.
Yeah.
The slave trade to the US was shut down largely in 1807, not completely, but largely. So if you look at the census data for the US in 1870, which is when black people were finally included, you'll find almost no Africans. They were, of course, native African Americans. And that's not something that people have taken on board.
Exactly. You also
of Africans to argue their federal. Every Native American tribe I've met, every federal petition I've met, all use Jim Crow and the Plecker Law and eugenics and all the different things to argue their federal petitions. They have to identify as Negroes to be recognized as an Indian tribe. Think about
deep.
that.
That's deep.
Southeast Indians that apply has to prove they have Negro in them to be recognized. Don't believe me? Look it up, check it out. My argument has always been to them, why is the Yamasee a problem? I can tell you why the Yamasee is a problem. Because we're the only tribe that looked like we were identified. How do I fake being a Negro? They be like, oh, y'all pretendians. How do you fake being a Negro? This is the description of my people. How do I pretend to be something that I, quote, look like? But you're descendants of us. Let's do one better. They say Seminole, Seminole, Cimarron, Maroon. So I hear my Maroon brothers say, oh, we're Maroons. To them, that equates to African. No, it doesn't. Cimarron, runaways, wild ones, the runaways. And you'll hear Seminole people say, no, that's not true. Well, I got links in our IG that says, yes.
They don't want for that to come out.
They don't want that to come out. Because, see, they don't know. They're still following the same oppressors that they say oppress them. They're following their information. Most of the websites and information you get in Native American tribes that they say is oral tradition isn't oral tradition. It is a regurgitation of what the Europeans said.
It's written tradition.
Right? But when we look at the word Seminole, runaway, you're going to tell me that those you see as Seminoles today look like Negroes on a slave plantation. That the colonists couldn't mistake them. Those my Negroes. You're going to tell me that the slave narratives inside of the court documentation, the judicial system that they have within the Lord proprietors, and all of the documentation that they have, which identified these as people as Negro that came off a ship, because that's what they did. They falsified paperwork. What do they call them? What is the terminology? I'm looking. I just had to come up with this the other day. Not the memoir, the manifesto. Thank you.
Oh, Aaron, he on it with the document.
I appreciate
so,
that.
That's gonna be
100%. Thank you. So in the manifesto, it says from Africa, blah 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 blah. Right? So how do you, as this light-skinned brother, say that I look like my original people, I'm full-blooded, and you don't look like none of what they described your people as? But I can show you where the Creek people, all identified as Negroes. Matter of fact, I can even show you where books say the invention of the Creek Nation, which people hate when I do that. When I sat before Stephen Hahn and we had the 300th year anniversary for the Yamasee War, and the question was asked, it sounds like you're saying, what was the difference between a Creek and a Yamasee? And the man paused, and you could see him breathe like, I got to really answer this. He said there was none. Why? Because the Yamasee were identified as Negro.
So you don't think a lot of Mexican officials know about this? You don't think a lot of Mexican officials seen all of these things? Look at this. This is an ancient Olmec. But what do you see down there? You see the fist? The so-called Black Power fist? This is how long we've been doing this. Hair. Look what you see. A pick. We pick our hair for the fro. Before we grow locks, we gotta pick our hair. Look what you see here. A fro pick. This is how long we've been doing this. So you don't think a lot of Mexican officials know about this? You don't think a lot of Mexican officials seen all of these things?
we are made by the past, or we are made by how we conceive of the past, how we think of the past. Many of us have been crippled by a certain false history of the past. We've been crippled because we think of ourselves as people who achieved nothing, who did nothing great in the world, who were merely slaves, etc., second-class citizens. That conception of the past has destroyed so many of us, so that it has become absolutely critical to remake a people, to transform a people. It is necessary to transform their conception of the past, to make them look again at the past and understand what really happened. Because the black has done extraordinary, remarkable things in the past, and it is only within recent times, within this century in fact, that the black has had a chance to look at his own history with his own eyes and to rewrite it. That is why it is so important. People seem to think, oh, the past is dead. The past is alive in us.